Hello everyone, I am the Man at Kirby. Welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews out of the deck techs. On this episode of the Brewery, I'll be continuing my older Commander spotlights by discussing my take on Nin, the Pain Artist. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel at no extra cost to you. But the very best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. There are plenty of perks for being a patron, such as early access to certain videos, exclusive deck techs, gifts, and more for as little as $1. You can also become a channel member for just 99 cents. Show off your support with a logo next to your name and exclusive emojis. Or you can always just support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Nin is a 1/1 Badakian wizard for 1 blue and 1 red. She has an activated ability where you pay X, 1 blue and 1 red in order to burn a creature for X, and then its controller draws X cards. This pinger is incredibly versatile, so your imagination is the limit to how you can build around it. As for myself, I decided to take an approach that seeks to make the most of her ability through various means that can potentially synergize amongst themselves, as well as not depending too much on the commander. For starters, we don't want to help opponents out when we just want to burn their creatures to death. Paying 7 mana to kill a 5 toughness creature is already taxing enough without its controller also drawing 5 cards. To that end, if we really want to kill creatures, we can do so by giving Nin Death Touch. Basilisk Collar gets the job done while also providing a nice bonus of lifelink. This is the only Death Touch enabling card in the deck, but that's because we have plenty of other interaction. Speaking of, Shadow Spear, Arcane Lighthouse, and Detection Tower are included to let us target our opponent's things to begin with. Shadow Spear also has the added bonus of being a 1 CMC equipment that gives Nin lifelink. This could be relevant in games, especially if Nin is able to deal X damage to a creature. The equipment are so good that Urza's Saga is included in order to tutor for them. These are more than a handful of artifacts in the deck, so even the construct is useful here. However, it's mostly for getting either Shadow Spear or Basilisk Collar. Although it can obviously also get Soul Ring or even Wayfarer's Bauble if it came down to it. But we'll see the rest of the deck's mana acceleration later on. Similarly to giving Death Touch, Charisma and Will Breaker also help us deal with opponent's creatures for just 1 generic paid into X. Why kill the creatures when you could just steal them instead? Sure, the opponent will still draw 1 card from the ability, so consider it a consolation prize. Silverclad Ferocidons is interaction, but we need to hit it with Nin. Fortunately, that just means that we also get to draw cards. This thing is amazing here even if it only causes opponents to choose what they're sacrificing. That being said, it's also still an 8/5 beater, so there's that too. Fiery Emancipation and City on Fire also do a ton of work here thanks to how Nin is worded. The controller doesn't deal cards equal to the damage Nin is dealing, but equal to the value of X. So if we paid 2 into X but controlled either of these enchantments, we'd be doing 6 damage to that creature, but its controller would only draw 2 cards. These are also just amazing on their own since they triple the damage any of our sources would deal to our opponents or permanents they control. Later on, we'll see some other types of pain effects that take advantage of this. Illusionist Bracers and Battle Mazes Bracers help us make the most of Nin's ability by copying it. If we manage to sink a lot of mana into X, these really go a long way. Especially if we hit our own things to draw a ton of cards, but we'll see our best cards for that soon. Marvin Murderous Mimic can also be used to copy Nin's ability, but only because it has it as well, along with every other activated ability on differently named creatures we control. Therefore, Marvin has potential other uses besides being a second copy of Nin. Minamo School at Water's Edge does it better though since it can untap Nin all while not taking up a slot in the deck. It enters untapped and taps for blue. There's a reason this land is so high on the secondary market. That being said, you can definitely omit it from your deck if you want to keep it at a lower budget. Same with excluding Urza's Saga or any other relatively high costed land you'll see in this deck tech. Back to the topic of interaction, don't worry, the deck is still running non-synergistic interaction, like Fierce Guardianship, An Offer You Can't Refuse, Swan Song, Counterspell, and Mana Drain for its counter magic, and Wild Magic Surge, Chaos Warp, Guthrie Writes History, Blasphemous Act, Vandal Blast, and Cyclonic Rift for removal. You can't go wrong with an interaction suite like this one for this deck. Even something like Mana Drain, which adds mana that can be sunk into Nin's ability. Or especially Blasphemous Act, since there are a ton of creatures in the deck that will trigger off of it, possibly even killing an opponent or 2 thanks to it. Now imagine doing it twice thanks to Mystic Sanctuary. We can top deck it in response to drawing a card and then have it at the ready to try again later, or when the table merits wiping again. Best of all, we can get this at instant speed with half of the deck's 7 fetch lands for that pro gamer move. Few things are more satisfying than cracking a fetch land in response to drawing a card and cheating in that Mystic Sanctuary. As previously mentioned, besides Blasphemous Act, we can also make the most of Nin's ability by hitting our own creatures. To that end, the best ones are Giggling Skitter Spike, Brash Taunter, and Stuffy Doll. These have built-in indestructibility, allowing us to sink all of our mana into Nin at the beginning of the end step before our turn in order to draw a ton of cards. Not only that, but hitting Brash Taunter will also deal that much damage to any opponent, while hitting Stuffy Doll will deal that much damage to the chosen opponent. The Skitter Spike also hurts opponents whenever it's blocking or attacking, making it even more dangerous, especially when it has a higher power. Blazing Sunsteel and Fiend Lash gives this damage sharing ability to the equipped creature, turning any of our creatures into Brash Taunter. When equipped to an indestructible creature, we don't have to worry about it dying. Or equipped to a creature also equipped with either Darksteel Plate, Mithril Coat, or Hammer of the Zan, which would also make them indestructible. These can also be equipped onto Nin to protect her, but if you read her ability carefully, she can also target herself. So if she's equipped with any of these to protect her from opponents' effects, keep in mind that it also protects her from her own. Which is why Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, and Champion's Helm are also included. Granted, we can't target our own things equipped with the Greaves, but so long as we have an indestructible creature to target with Nin, we can protect her with the Greaves if it came down to it. But Hexproof is naturally better than Shroud. Pariah's Shield is another amazing equipment in the deck due to the indestructible creatures in it, along with creatures we can make indestructible. Being able to redirect damage dealt to us to an indestructible creature goes a long way in keeping us alive. And not only that, but equipped to something like Stuffy Doll or Brash Taunter, and it makes for opponents to really figure out how to deal with you. Just imagine resolving that Blasphemous Act when we control something like that. Screaming Nemesis and Donna Noble might not be indestructible, but hitting them with Nin will also bring the pain to opponents. These can still be a one-time only thing for us to draw cards and hurt opponents, but ideally you either make them indestructible or only hit them with enough damage to keep them alive. The Nemesis is especially brutal since opponents won't be able to gain any life for the rest of the game afterwards. With Donna Noble, you can soulbound her to an indestructible creature or a creature with higher toughness and still take advantage of her trigger. Draw of God of Fury also helps deal damage to opponents' faces. Sink enough into X and you might kill the opponent with excess damage before they even get a chance to use the cards they drew into. Also, with the damage multiplication effects, this will deal a ton of damage. Torolf is so good here that his backside is never cast. We're going to always cast this card as Torolf. Razorkin Needlehead and Scrawling Crawler are included for if opponents inevitably do draw cards either from Nin or their own effects. That being said, these are yet another way to hurt opponents with Nin, especially if we're able to sink enough mana to kill them. We can also make the most of opponents drawing cards with Format Classic Consecrated Sphinx. If we activate Nin at the beginning of the end step before ours, we can target that current player's creature in order for them to draw a bunch of cards that they'll inevitably have to discard most of during their cleanup step. And then we'll draw twice as many cards before we start our turn. Either way, this card is so great on its own, but just the more amazing thanks to our commander. Back to dishing out pain, Psychosis Crawler, Niv-Mizzet Perun, and Niv-Mizzet the Firemine are included for when we draw into a ton of cards. Once we get an engine going where we can ping our own stuff to draw a ton of cards while also hurting opponents, we can either hurt them more or have these become that pain element. Being able to hurt opponents whenever we draw cards is amazing because we don't have to worry about making them draw in order to hurt them. Vinwixit Verbose Host and Teferi's Ageless Insight have us draw even more cards, making these 3 cards even more brutal. Vinwixit needs us to have max power, max speed, which fortunately won't take that long with this deck. However, before then, it still provides us with a limitless hand size. This is important since we want to constantly draw as many cards as possible. This is why Reliquary Tower, Wizard Class, Proph's Eidetic Memory, Thought Vessel, the Candler of Endless Water, and the right half of Roaring Furnace, Steaming Sauna are also included. All of these provide other uses besides the limitless hand size, with the tower being the only one that doesn't. But its benefit is not taking up a slot in the deck, which is important. The Mana Rocks do take up a slot in the deck, but help us accelerate outside of green, which is also important. Back to drawing into so many cards that warrant including these cards, the deck has Body of Knowledge and Illusory Ambusher. Even if we're unable to ping these with Nin, drawing us twice as many cards, they'll trigger off of any source of damage. So we can block big creatures with these for value or ping them for less than their toughness for more value. Body of Knowledge becomes even better because it's as big as our hand. So if it survives Nin's ability, it can become even larger, which will make it survive an even larger activation. So good. Now imagine these equipped with Pariah and or an Indestructible equipment. Last but not least are the Watcher in the Water and the Locust God. These create tokens for each card we draw, with the Watcher having the exception of us needing to draw that card outside of our turn. Good thing we can activate Nin at instant speed, right? The Hazy Insects provided by the Locust God could also give us another avenue of victory via 1,000 cuts, especially if we're pinging opponents through redirected damage, damage from us drawing, damage from them drawing, or a bunch of weenies getting through. Cur Keep can also create tokens but not at the same level. This doesn't take up a slot and is a good mana sink. We get a chump blocker or a throwaway creature we can sink a ton of mana into Din for. This is great for just 2 mana and tapping. We can also save that token for later if we really wanted to sink mana into obliterating it for value. Speaking of sinking mana into value, we have to do as best as we can in a non-green deck. The Enigma Jewel, the final mana rock of the deck, only costs 1 blue to cast, so unfortunately we can't tutor for it with Urza Saga. That being said, it's another Soul Ring type rock that can tap for 2 colorless to help activate Nin. Its crafted side is pretty strong, with Locus of Enlightenment being able to copy activated abilities. It also provides a way to copy activated abilities in general. However, that craft cost is pretty steep and the deck doesn't have throwaway cards for that. In any case, a second Soul Ring here is still good. Ancient Tomb, Arid Archway, Guildless Commons, Izzet Boilerworks, Muruganda Wasteway, and Temple of the False God are more double mana sources, and none of these take up slots in the deck. These are pretty self-explanatory, although you have to be careful with the Raceway since it only gives double colorless at max speed and the Temple only works at all with 5 or more lands. Speaking of lands, Navigation Orb, Burnished Heart, Canoptic Wraith, Sword of the Animus, Bitterthorn Nissa's Animus, and Sword of Hearth and Home are amazing here since they provide the best kind of mana acceleration, land-based. Best of all, Sword of Hearth and Home also provides protection against white and green, which are 2 colors not in the deck, making equipped creature potentially unblockable. Training Grounds and Braid of Fire are enchantment-based acceleration but amazing nonetheless, since enchantments are much harder to get rid of. Training Ground is amazing since it'll reduce Nin's ability to at least 1 blue and 1 red for 2 damage and 2 cards. Braid of Fire gets insane if not dealt with, especially in the early game. Being able to sink all that red mana at instant speed into Nin can get out of hand very quickly. As for the rest of the lands, apart from the previously mentioned ones, the deck is running Molten Tributary, Steam Vents, Thundering Falls, Voltov Fjord, Cascade Bluffs, Ferris Lake, Storm-Carved Coast, Training Center, and Command Tower, as well as 3 of each basic land for the basic land ramp effects. As with all of my deck techs, you can build your mana base according to your budget. Whether you include more expensive cards or even cheaper cards is up to you. You do you. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Nin the Pain Artist. She is one of the first commanders ever released in a precon way back in 2011 for the first commander sets. It's crazy to see how good she still is and interesting to play with, as were most of the commanders in that era. Each year more and more toys are released that make this commander even better. She definitely wasn't as strong as in 2011 as she is now. However, like I mentioned before, I used a little bit of everything to build her. But how would you build her? Let me know in the comments. If you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. I also want to thank any channel members. Your membership is greatly appreciated. I also want to thank those who voted on seeing older commanders instead of me returning to continue with the latest ones. Thanks for your patience while I took my vacation. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of The Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am the Man at Kirby, and happy brewing.